Hey everyone! ChatGPTaylor aka Taylor here. Welcome back to the channel. Today's video is something that I probably should have done weeks ago, but better late than never, I suppose. With the premiere of this Disventure Camp season for only weeks away, it's time for me to give my thoughts on all 18 campers slated to compete in the new season. In this video, I'm going to give my general thoughts on the campers, the storylines that they might be involved in during the season, and where in the season I project them to place. And one more thing. Throughout the video, I'll be using the sample addition lines for each camper as a part of my analysis. I know that Jade confirmed that these sample lines aren't canon, but just because those lines aren't canon, that doesn't mean we can't get similar lines that lead to a similar story. That's why I'm including them in my analysis. With that, let's get started. Before I begin, make sure to like and subscribe if this video is to your liking, and make sure to comment down below if there's anything that you would like to see going forward. First, we have Alessio, a 38-year-old Italian painter. According to his introduction on the Odd Nation Cartoons YouTube community page, he's calm, introverted, laid back, and prefers to stay under the radar. Unfortunately, I feel like this is a red flag for him. I get Kai vibes from him, so I can imagine a scenario where his laid-back demeanor causes him to make an enemy really early on in the game. Assuming that Matteo was his alias during the casting for the season, his first sample line indicates that he could end up in a situation where he's so caught up in his artistic mind that he messes up the challenge for his team. And when his teammates confront him for messing up the challenge, that could lead to a response similar to his second sample line. As for his third sample line, that could come into play when he's introducing himself to his teammates and explaining why he's competing on the show. So overall, as much as I think he'll be a cool guy, his laid-back demeanor will probably cost his team a challenge. His teammates will have to decide between voting him out or voting out the potential villain of the season, and his teammates play for strength and vote Alessio out pretty early. Probably within the first 6 eliminations. Sorry Alessio, but I think he might end up being the guy who learns that not everyone will agree with his way of thinking. Up next, we have Amelie, a 36-year-old French-American businesswoman. According to her introductory post, she's sharp, driven, ambitious, and will bend rules to achieve success. Based on this description, it seems like Amelie might be more of an antagonistic character. And her sample lines from the casting could support this theory. To me, her 3 lines give me the impression that she'll try to be a bit of a puppet master and rule her team from the shadows. My gut is telling me that she'll be a bit of a pre-merge antagonist, and that her downfall will come from either being discovered as a puppet master, being taken out by a bigger antagonist, or self-destructing by creating a plan that is too ambitious. Perhaps she tries to use her connections to rally the campers against a very notable camper, but the camper in question rallies everyone against Amelie, resulting in her elimination. I could see this elimination taking place between the late pre-merge and the early merge, but regardless of when or if it happens, I hope that Amelie will make a big impact while she's on the show. To close out the 8 names, we have Anastasia, a 24-year-old Russian-Australian model. She is described to be charming, charismatic, determined, and success-oriented. Normally, I would say that this kind of character would get taken out earlier than expected due to being popular among the cast. And that might still be the case. However, I feel like Anastasia could be a character that gets a lot of development. While some of her sample lines may imply a bit of pretentiousness, I'm really interested in her third line, which implies that she has a bit of a deeper backstory. If the writers wanted to, I think they could write Anastasia similar to how they wrote Miriam and James. Have her start out a bit pretentious and snobby, but slowly have those walls broken down to reveal her true feelings. Maybe she joined the show to prove that she could win something without relying on her looks. Maybe she joined the show to prove that the people that forced her out of modeling were wrong. I'm not sure. But I have a gut feeling that she'll stick around for a while. I'll project for her to make it to the top 5, but I would not be shocked if she won the season. On to the next letter, we have Benji, a 21-year-old Japanese law student from Canada. He's described to be humorous, silly, laid-back, and empathetic. Although I think he might be entertaining, I don't think he'll make it too far into the season. Based on his description, my gut is telling me that he might be the character that tries to make people laugh, but ends up annoying his team in the process. And I don't think his sample lines help his chances. His first line tells me that he probably doesn't know what he's doing, and his second line seems to be setting him up as the camper to lose a challenge for his team. So I could easily see him trying to raise the morale of his teammates, ending up annoying them for being too silly, and the final blow is him losing the challenge for his team, resulting in his elimination. However, if there's one thing going for him, is that his third line hints at him having a deep backstory and a strong connection with another camper in the series, so he could make it to the late pre-merge as a support character. But unfortunately, I think he'll be one of the first ones out. Probably one of the first 5 boots. Up next, we have Diego, a 21-year-old Colombian tourist guide. He's described to be charming, social, and full of life. He's definitely being presented as a popular camper, which helps his chances of making it far. And his first two sample lines imply that he's generally a happy person who wants to raise the spirits of the people around him. However, I'm a little concerned that there's nothing to imply that there's a sad backstory to his character. In past seasons, campers who had sad backstories ended up making it far, and I can't seem to figure out a sad backstory for him. Now, his third sample line indicates that he's afraid of missing out on stuff, which could be the reason why he wants to live life to the fullest. And maybe Odd Nation Cartoons is intentionally hiding the possibility of a sad backstory so it hits harder for the viewers when it's revealed. But right now, if we're following the trends of previous seasons, I just don't think there's enough evidence for me to think he'll make it far. He might make it to the merge for being a good challenge competitor and a popular camper, but I could easily see him being taken out at the early to mid-merge for being a challenge threat or the leader of an opposing alliance. Moving on, we have Hannah, a 19-year-old Canadian bartender with Filipino roots. She's described as being sociable, humorous, and fun-loving. I have reasonably higher hopes for her. Since she's quoted to be sociable and good at making people feel at ease, I feel like people would want to keep her around longer than others. And considering her first sample line, I feel like she'll be a pleasant person to have around. That being said, I have two predictions for Hannah. 1, I think she'll get into a relationship with one of the other campers. I might not be reading into this correctly, but from her second sample line, I feel like she might be a bit flirtatious. Specifically the, assuming you can handle it, part of the line. And 2, I think she might end up being a bit of a support character. This is based off of her third sample line. I could imagine her saying this line to try and cheer up a camper who is feeling sad. Therefore, my guess is that Hannah will probably make it to the mid-merge, but she might get taken out before the endgame due to her possibly being a support character and in a relationship. Up next, we have Sister Isabel, a 23-year-old Argentinian-American nun and influencer. She's described as a powerful communicator who hopes to spread her message while on the show. Truthfully, when I first saw the cast poster for the season, Isabel was the one that stuck out the most to me, mostly because of her design. And her sample lines seem to indicate that she'll be a generally positive camper to have around. However, as much as I want that to happen, my gut is telling me that Isabel won't last too long. Although she seems very sweet, I feel like she could end up being a support camper for some of the other campers. Her third sample line in particular implies to me that she might form a strong bond with one of the LGBTQIA+ campers in the season. I could imagine a scenario where Isabel makes it known that she's an ally, forms a strong bond with one of the campers, motivates them to ask out their love interest, and then gets voted out. I can't figure out why she would get voted out, but if she does end up being a support character, then that's probably going to be her fate regardless. Sorry Isabel, but I think you'll probably end up being a mid to late pre-merge boot. Up next, we have Ivy, a 26-year-old actress with Hungarian roots. She's described as being charismatic, full of energy, charming, and enthusiastic. I also have high hopes for Ivy. Considering her description, I feel like she'll be pretty popular among the other campers, while also being entertaining for the audience. And considering her first sample line, I feel like Odd Nation Cartoons isn't going to go the pretentious and snobby route with her. And based on her last two sample lines, I feel like there's a good backstory just waiting to come out. To me, her second line implies that she might not be good in social situations, and her third line implies that people don't know the real her. Especially the part about the light in her soul being turned off. I think part of her story arc will be her realizing that being yourself and showing people who you really are is just as important for her as being an actress. Therefore, I feel like she could easily make a deep run in the game. At least top 7 for her. Maybe top 5. And maybe even more. Moving on, we have Jade, a 29-year-old Nigerian marine biologist student from the United States. She's described to be intelligent, composed, analytical, and a natural leader. Normally, these kinds of traits give someone a good chance of being successful in this kind of show. However, it doesn't always work that way in Disventure Camp. Considering that Disventure Camp has a history of being unpredictable, my gut is telling me that Jade could end up being the decoy winner that gets cut near the end in favor of someone else. From Jade's first sample line, I feel like she'll start the game being a leader figure on her team and making a few good moves. Then based on her second sample line, she'll probably face some pushback from the main antagonist of the season and lose a bit of power. But in the end, she'll regain some power and make a big move or two, but then get taken out as a big threat and for the sake of keeping the show unpredictable. Overall, I project a top 6 finish for Jade. She has winner potential, but I'm not fully buying into it just yet. Going on to the 10th camper on the list, we have Logan, a 20-year-old sports coaching student from Canada. He's described as being humble, fair, athletic, and a team player. Logan is the first camper where I could genuinely see him getting any placement. He could be a popular guy who ends up being a pre-merge boot to help establish the main antagonist as someone who the audience should root against. He could be an early merge boot as a physical threat. And he could easily be a finalist as the fun-loving guy who people want to root for. Looking at his sample lines, his first 2 lines don't indicate anything too specific. But for his third line, it opens the door for there to be some sort of plot where Logan assures himself that it's okay to pursue his passions. Therefore, I'm leaning towards Logan being a mid to late merge boot, but I could also see him being a potential winner if Odd Nation Cartoons wants to have a winner who is predominantly known for their fun-loving nature rather than their development. Up next, we have Lynda, a 51-year-old American housewife. She's described as being strong-willed, determined, persistent, and a fan of competition reality shows. To me, there are some signs that point towards Lynda potentially being one of the main antagonists of the season. On top of her description saying that she'll always find a way to get what she wants, her first two sample lines imply that she'll try and play an under-the-radar, weakling game at first, similar to how Fiore played early in Season 1. As for her third sample line, it's possible that Lynda's motivation for being on the show is because she feels like she hasn't done anything in her life, and that this show is her one chance to do something meaningful. So overall, I feel like her potential as a main antagonist could help her make it to the merge, and her potential for a deep backstory makes it possible for her to make it deep into the merge. I have high hopes for her. Next on the list is Marissa, a 25-year-old aspiring military person with South African roots. She's described as being strong, determined, disciplined, resilient, and having a strong sense of justice. Although she could easily be someone who helps out her team in the pre-merge, my gut is telling me that she'll be taken out in the late pre-merge. Based on her first two sample lines, I get the impression that she'll try and motivate her teammates to work harder, which could make them annoyed with her. This would allow one of the main antagonists to swoop in and blindside her. This would help complete an arc where she starts out standing for justice, but being blindsided makes her remember that the world doesn't always stand for justice and that she can't expect people to play morally. Her third sample line does imply that there's a developed backstory for her, and I wouldn't mind having her make a deep run in the season, but there are just too many red flags for me to see her as something more than a mid to late pre-merge boot. Next, we have Natalia, a 28-year-old Puerto Rican publicist. She's described as charming, vibrant, a social butterfly, and an eager talker. Even though I think she'll be very well liked in the community, I don't think she's going to win. Since she's described as being able to ask bold questions, there's a chance that people could be turned away by her boldness and want to vote her out early because of it. And her first sample line implies that she could be perceived as too social for some people. At the same time, I could also see Natalia being a strong friend for one of the other characters. Since her first sample line implies that she might have a close ally that may not originally want to be her ally, they could share an arc where they learn to like each other, and then once Natalia is taken out, her ally would then be set up to make a run to the finale in her honor. And even though I think there would be a lot to explore with Natalia's background, I'm just not convinced yet that Natalia will make a deep run. So, I think I'm going to project that Natalia will make it to the early to mid-merge as a likable character. Up next, we have Richard, a 61-year-old Canadian basketball coach. He's described as being positive, extroverted, a natural leader, encouraging, and valuing teamwork and integrity. Based on this description and his first sample line, I could easily see him being in the same position as Marissa, a natural leader who tries to push their team to victory, but gets taken out by an antagonist who doesn't value integrity. At the same time though, I don't think Odd Nation Cartoons would give two campers the same storyline. So maybe he will have a bit more or a bit less success than Marissa. His third sample line does show his motivations for going on Disventure Camp, which does increase his chances of winning in my eyes. And since he's stated to be emotionally driven, I could see him forging a friendship with another camper that gives both of them relevancy in the game. So overall, I think I'll project Richard as a mid to late pre-merge boot, with the potential to make it to the merge under the right circumstances. Moving on, we have Spencer, a 20-year-old math student from England. He's described as being brilliant, analytical, pragmatic, curious, and strategic. This might be a hot take, but I don't think Spencer will last that long in the season. Being strategic is a good quality to have, but being strictly strategic doesn't always work in these kinds of shows because you're dealing with emotional beings who won't always make the ideal decisions. That could easily be Spencer's downfall. And after looking at his first two sample lines, I get the impression that Spencer might not have the best social game, which could easily hurt his chances of winning. His third sample line implies that he might be in a relationship, which would drastically increase his chances of making it far, but since these lines are not canon, that line could have easily been used to see if his VA could make an emotional statement. So for now, I'll stick to my guns and say that Spencer will get taken out in the pre-merge for being overly logical in a situation where he needed to be emotional. Next, we have Ted, a 46-year-old poker player. He's described as being strategic, distrustful, and a master at reading people. Like Lynda, I think Ted has the potential to be one of the main antagonists in the season. His background as a poker player, where he's used to being deceitful, reading others, and controlling his image gives him the necessary tools to succeed at manipulation. And when looking at his third sample line, he also has the potential for some deep backstory that led him to become the guy he is now. However, since it's noted that it could be hard for him to maintain relationships, it's very possible that he could be a pre-merge boot as well. Or maybe he does become an antagonist for the first half of the game, and then his poor relationship management causes his allies to turn against him early in the merge. There's a range of placements that he could get in this season, but regardless, I'd recommend keeping your eye on this guy because he could make a big splash in this season. The penultimate camper on the list is Tristan, an 18-year-old non-binary fashion student from Canada with Norwegian roots. They are described to be calm, empathetic, peaceful, supportive, and seeking fairness. Personally, I would love it if Tristan made a deep run. I think their design is great and I think there could be a lot to explore with their backstory. That being said, I'm not fully convinced that they will make a deep run. History has shown that Disventure Camp tends to eliminate the calm, supportive, and peaceful campers early on so that the more dramatic campers can continue causing drama in the second half of the season. And if Tristan truly is peaceful, then they might not make it far. And considering how they're described as supportive, they could end up getting the Ashley treatment where they are eliminated for being the glue that holds their alliance together. However, my gut is telling me that Tristan has some sort of backstory that will buy them a bit more time in the game, so I'll project that Tristan will make it to the early merge. Hopefully they can prove me wrong and make it further. And finally, we have Zaid, a 30-year-old American chef with Moroccan heritage. He's described to be kind, dependable, nurturing, with integrity and excellent listening skills. While he seems like a nice guy, I can't help but feel like he'll be a pre-merge boot. He gives support character vibes, and support characters don't have the best track record recently. And when looking at his sample lines, even though they're not canon, they don't give much of a reason to suspect that Zaid would last long. I don't think he'll be the first one out, but I do think his morals and integrity will put him on the radar of one of the antagonists, and they'll take him out shortly thereafter. So, I don't see him making it further than the pre-merge. So to recap, my projections have Benji, Alessio, Spencer, and Zaid being eliminated in the early to mid pre-merge. Then I see Isabel, Marissa, Richard, and Amelie being eliminated in the mid to late pre-merge. Next, I see Ted, Tristan, Diego, and Natalia being eliminated in the early to mid-merge. This is followed by Hannah, Jade, and Ivy being eliminated in the mid-merge. And finally, I project Logan, Anastasia, and Lynda to make a deep run into the merge. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that I think the final three will be Logan, Anastasia, and Lynda. I could easily see someone like Ivy or Jade swooping in and winning instead of one of those three. In the end, these are all just rough guesses based off of 18 YouTube community posts and a close casting call page with sample lines that aren't canon. I could be horribly wrong, and I'll accept it if that's the case. These are just predictions, and I'm sure you have your own predictions for the next season. All we can do is wait and see what we got right and what we got wrong. And that about does it for this video. What did you think of the video? Do you agree with my assessment? Do you disagree? Who do you think is poised to make a deep run in Season 4? Either way, please let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Thank you very much for watching. Click like if you like the video, click subscribe if you really like the video, and for some ending words of wisdom. It's okay to be supportive to the people around you, but keep in mind that when you're on a show with a prize of $1 million, being supportive will only get you so far, and don't be surprised when people take advantage of your kindness for their own personal gain. Thank you, and farewell.